In the ancient world, before a coin could enter circulation, it had to pass through fire. A refiner would heat the metal, watch what rose to the surface, and make a judgment. If the gold held its value, pure, unalloyed, it was stamped and approved. The Greek word for that approval was adokimos, tested and found genuine. But if the metal came out of the furnace impure, cracked with alloy, unable to hold what it claimed to be worth, a different stamp went on it. Adokimos. Rejected. Counterfeit. Failed the test. Paul opens his letter to the Romans with that second word. Chapter 1, verse 28. He describes what happens when a mind keeps turning away from God, keeps choosing the counterfeit over the real until it loses its ability to tell the difference. And he names the result with that metallurgical term. God gave them over to an adokimos mind, a mind that went into the furnace and came out failing. A mind so corroded, it now calls the rotten thing good, and the good thing rotten. That is the patient. That is the diagnosis. And it sits at the front of the letter like a case file opened on a physician's desk. Everything Paul writes for the next 11 chapters, the law, grace, faith, justification, the struggle of chapter 7, the triumph of chapter 8, all of it is building toward a cure. Hold on to that failed coin. It is coming back, and when it does, it will be inside out. For 11 chapters, Paul has done nothing but pile up mercy. What God did, what God gave. Grace stacked on grace, none of it earned, every bit of it free. 11 chapters of God moving toward people who could not move toward Him. Then, chapter 12 opens, and the entire letter pivots on a single word. Therefore. Everything before it was the gift. Everything after it is the response. The hinge is that small. I appeal to you, therefore, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. A living sacrifice. The people who first heard that sentence would have flinched. They knew sacrifice as something that ended in blood, an animal on a stone altar that did not walk away. Paul takes that whole image, the smoke, the finality, the cost, and bends it into something that breathes. A sacrifice that stays alive, which means a sacrifice that can climb back off the altar any time it wants. Every single day, it has to choose to stay. And then Paul names what this is. He calls it your logiken latrein. English translations split on how to handle that phrase. Some say spiritual worship. Others say reasonable service. But there is an English word hiding inside the Greek, and you can hear it. Logical. The worship that makes sense. The response that fits. After 11 chapters of unearned mercy, holding anything back would be the irrational choice. Surrender is simply what the math comes to. So worship, in Paul's framework, is not an hour of singing once a week. It is a body laid down and kept down. And the very next instruction, the one about the mind, is how that surrendered life actually changes from the inside. You give God the body. He goes to work on the way you see. Those are not two separate commands. They are one motion. Lay yourself on the altar and let Him remake the lens while you are there. Do not be conformed to this world. That is the first half of the verse, and the Greek beneath it is worth slowing down for. The word is suschēmatizō. Buried inside it is the root schema. And schema means the outward shape of a thing, the fashion of it, the form it wears on the surface, the part that shifts from year to year. Think about how differently you carry yourself at 17 and at 70. Same person, completely different schema. Think about the clothes that felt obvious a decade ago and look like a costume now. That is schema, the changeable shell, the mold of the moment. So when Paul says, "Do not be suschēmatizō to this world," he is not warning about one dramatic compromise. He is talking about the quiet thing, the slow thing, being pressed into the shape of whatever surrounds you without ever deciding to. A piece of clay does not agree to the mold. It just goes soft and takes the form pressing against it. And the pressing never announces itself. It feels like belonging, like fitting in, like finally being at ease among everyone else who already took the shape.
One more layer. The word translated world here is not the planet. It is aeon, the age. This present age. Paul is not warning you away from creation, away from trees and bread and music and human skin. He is warning you away from a way of seeing that belongs to a particular slice of time, a slice with an expiration date stamped on it. The age has a deadline. To be shaped by it is to be shaped by something that is already passing away. Here is what makes the conforming so dangerous. It feels like nothing. It feels like being normal, like keeping up, like thinking what reasonable people think. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to be squeezed into a shrinking mold. It happens through what you watch, what you scroll past, what you assume, what you let go unquestioned, until the values of a dying age feel like simple common sense. Some of the oldest manuscript readings phrase this command as, "Stop being conformed." Not "don't start," stop. Which means the process was already underway. Paul is not warning people who might one day drift. He is talking to people mid-drift, already half-pressed into the mold, and telling them to put the brakes on something that started long before they noticed. And there is no neutral setting. That is the trap nobody mentions. You do not get to opt out of being shaped and simply float free, unformed, your own person. A lens left alone still clouds. Clay left in the rain still hardens into whatever it was leaning toward. If nothing higher is actively remaking you, the age is passively making you in its image. And the age is very good at its work. And it never takes a day off. Now watch what Paul sets against the outer mold, because the second word is built on an entirely different root. But be transformed. The Greek is metamorphoō. You already know its English descendant, metamorphosis, the thing that happens inside a chrysalis. Here is the part that matters. Suschēmatizō is built on schema, the outer form, the surface. Metamorphoō is built on morphē, the inner essential nature, the thing a thing actually is underneath. Schema is the shell. Morphē is the substance. Paul has chosen his two words with surgical precision. The world wants to reshape your shell. God wants to change your essence. A caterpillar that paints itself green and learns to flap is still a caterpillar. Metamorphoō is the other thing entirely. The structures dissolve and reassemble. What crawled in is not what flies out. Same creature, new nature. Now follow the grammar, because this is where the verse stops being something you stitch onto a pillow. Metamorphoō sits in the passive voice. Be transformed. The action lands on you. Someone else is performing it. And it sits in the present tense. which in Greek means ongoing, unfinished, happening and happening and happening. Not a switch you flip once, a current you stay in. Which raises the obvious question, and it is a fair one. If the transformation is passive, if God does it, then why am I commanded to do anything at all? People will tell you renewing your mind takes real discipline, real showing up, prayer and scripture and consistency. And they are right. So is be transformed just a way of dodging the hard part? No. And the way out of that knot is a garden. A gardener has never once manufactured life. He cannot reach into a seed and switch it on. He cannot make a single green thing grow by force of will. What he can do is plant, water, pull weeds, and keep the plant in the light. He does everything except the actual growing, and the actual growing is the only thing that matters. And it is the one thing entirely out of his hands. He is not passive. He is up before dawn, hands in the dirt, but he is not the source of the life. He is the one who keeps showing up where the life happens. That is exactly the command Paul is giving. You are not ordered to transform yourself because you cannot. You are ordered to stay in the light, to plant yourself where the change occurs, to stop crawling off the altar. The effort is real, and it is never the effort of self-manufacture. It is the effort of staying put under the hands that are doing the work. One quick thing before we go further. If this kind of study, the kind that slows down, looks under the English and lets the text speak on its own terms, if it has put even one clear thought in front of you, would you consider becoming a channel member? Membership is what makes this research and production possible. And if you are already a member or you support this work in any way, thank you. You are the reason the next one gets made.
So what exactly is being remade? Paul says, the renewing of your mind. And the word for mind is the hinge of the whole sentence. The Greek is nous, and nous is not your IQ. It is not the part of you that does arithmetic or remembers passwords. It is wider and deeper. Nous is the seat of perception, the place where you make moral judgments, read what is in front of you, and decide what is real and what matters. It is not what you know, it is how you see. The mind is not a container you fill with better information. It is a lens, and a lens is shaped by whatever it stares at long enough. Which is why renewing the nous changes so much more than a download of facts ever could. Change a person's information, and you have given them data. Change their nous, and you have changed what they are even capable of perceiving. The same scene now looks different to them. The thing they used to want, they see through. The thing they used to overlook, they suddenly cannot stop noticing. And the word for renewing guards against the cheap version. It is anakinosis. Greek has two different words for new. One is neos, new in time, the latest model of the same old thing, this year's phone. The other is kainos, new in kind, new in nature, a quality that did not exist before. Anakinosis is built on kainos. This is not your same old mind refurbished. It is not the caterpillar with a fresh coat of paint. It is a different kind of mind than the one you started with. Put those two ideas together, and you can finally see the law running underneath this entire verse. Conformity and transformation are not two unrelated dangers. They are the same mechanism running in opposite directions. You become what you behold. Stare at the age long enough, and you take its shape without noticing. Keep your gaze fixed on something higher. Stay in that light, and you are slowly remade into a different nature. The lens is always being shaped. The only question is, shaped by what? You can test this in your own experience. Spend a week soaked in outrage, the feed, the comments, the cycle, and you start seeing enemies everywhere. In the slow driver, in the family member who voted wrong, in the stranger with the bad take. Spend a week around a genuinely gentle person, and something in you softens to match without a single conscious decision. We absorb the shape of what we attend to. Attention is not neutral. Attention is formation. Whatever you keep looking at is quietly teaching your nous what normal looks like, what beautiful looks like, what is worth reaching for. The screen you stare at before you are fully awake is renewing your mind too. The only question is, in whose image? Now Paul tells you what the renewed mind can finally do. And this is where the coin from the beginning of the letter comes back. So that you may discern what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. The word translated discern is adokimos. It carries the image of an assayer testing metal. He puts gold to the fire. He watches what rises. He separates what is genuine from what only shines. And after the test, he stamps his approval on it. That is adokimos. Not a guess, not a feeling, a trained, tested judgment. Now, pull out that word from your back pocket. Remember the diseased mind from chapter 1? The one Paul called adokimos. Failed the test. Counterfeit. Rejected at the furnace. Same root. Turned completely around. The mind that once flunked the test is now the mind that runs the test. The metal that came out of the fire rejected is now the assayer standing over the furnace, able to tell real gold from fool's gold. The whole arc of the letter bends right here, in one word that reverses another. The patient does not just recover. The patient becomes the physician.
And look at what Paul says the tested mind discovers, because he stacks 3 words on it. The will of God is good and acceptable and perfect. 3 words climbing. Good, meaning it is actually for you, not against you. Acceptable, meaning that once you see it clearly, you find you can say yes to it. It is the kind of thing a renewed heart welcomes instead of resents. Perfect, meaning complete, lacking nothing. The path that was always the best one, even while the age was screaming that it was narrow and joyless. The clouded mind reads God's will as a threat to be managed. The renewed mind reads the same will and finds it good. Nothing about the will changed. The eyes did. That is the quiet revolution sitting inside this verse. Most people assume the point of a renewed mind is to finally force yourself to obey a God you secretly suspect is against you. Paul says something far better. The renewed mind stops suspecting. It tests the thing it feared and discovers gold. Obedience stops feeling like surrender to an enemy and starts feeling like agreement with the truth. And that is exactly how a trained assayer works. He does not learn to spot counterfeits by studying counterfeits. He handles real gold so long, so deeply, that the fake announces itself the moment it touches his fingers. He is ruined for forgery. He cannot be fooled anymore. A renewed mind becomes exactly that. Not a mind crammed with warnings about everything wrong, but a mind so saturated in what is true that the lie loses its disguise. That word, metamorphoō, should ring familiar for a reason that goes past butterflies. The same verb shows up on a mountain. 3 disciples climbed it with Jesus. tired, probably not expecting much. And while they were up there, something happened that they would spend the rest of their lives reaching for words to describe. His face went bright as the sun. His clothing turned a white that the writer strained to capture, whiter than anyone on earth could bleach it. And the verb the gospel writers reach for, the word for what they watched happen, is the exact same verb. He was metamorphoō, transfigured. Matthew 17:2. It was not a costume thrown over the old Jesus. It was not light landing on him from outside, the way the moon borrows from the sun. The light came from within. For one unbearable moment, the morphe, the inner essence, the substance of who he had always been underneath the ordinary carpenter's skin, shone straight out through the surface. The disciples were not watching Jesus become something new. They were watching what was already there stop hiding. That is the picture sitting underneath your verse. The transformation you are commanded to receive is the same word used for what happened when his glory broke through his skin. Your change is not the manufacture of something foreign. It is the slow uncovering of what God is putting inside you until one day it shows on the surface the way it showed on the mountain. And a few chapters earlier in the same letter, Paul names the destination out loud. Romans 8:29. That we would be conformed to the image of his Son. Conformed, shaped, pressed to match. The age wants to press you into its mold. God is pressing you into one too. But this mold is a person, and the pressing comes from the inside out. And the shape you are being pressed toward is not a trend with an expiration date. It is the face of the only one who was ever fully alive. The lens, in the end, has a face. You become what you behold, and you were made to behold him.
Which brings all of this back to your actual life, where the pressure is never as loud as a mountain. It is quiet. That is the whole danger of aeon, the age. It does not knock. It does not ask permission. It works through the ordinary hours. The feed you scroll before you are fully awake. The opinions you absorb from people who seem fine. The slow drift in what you find normal and what you find embarrassing. You did not choose most of what shapes you. It chose you while you were busy. And one morning you noticed that something you once would have questioned now sounds like obvious good sense, and you cannot remember deciding to believe it. That is conformity. It never felt like a decision. That is exactly how it works. A renewed mind is what lets you see the line move. It is what lets you look at the thing everyone is reaching for and feel, underneath the pool, that it is lighter than it looks. So the renewed mind is not a feeling you summon. It is not a stack of verses memorized to feel productive. It is what grows when you keep putting yourself, day after unremarkable day, in front of the true thing instead of the loud thing. You cannot manufacture it. You already know that, because you have tried to white-knuckle your way into being a different person and watched it collapse by Wednesday. But you can plant yourself in the light. You can keep showing up where the change happens. You can stay on the altar one more day. And slowly, in a process you will mostly not feel while it is happening, the lens gets ground into something clearer. What used to look good starts to look hollow. What you used to overlook starts to look like gold. That is not you trying harder. That is you being transformed, present tense, ongoing, by hands that are not your own. The metal that failed the fire is learning to run the test. The command was never to think your way into a new mind. It was to hold still long enough to be given one. If even one line of this helped you see that verse differently, leave a word in the comments, even just one, because every comment helps this study reach someone who is quietly searching for it. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper,
and share it with the person you thought about while you were listening.